Public policy coverage in North Carolina is supported by Electric Cities of North Carolina, the service organization that supports municipally owned electric utilities, also known as public power providers across the state. These locally owned, locally operated public enterprises provide significant value to their customers and communities. To learn more about Electric Cities, visit electricities.com.
For the News and Observer and the NC Insider, I'm Dawn Vaughan, your host for Under the Dome for the week of Monday, October 24th, 2022. We are just 2 weeks and a day away from Election Day in North Carolina. I'm here today with my colleague, Avi Bajpai in Raleigh, and from Charlotte, our Observer colleague, Will Wright. We've got lots to talk about, so let's get rolling. Will, your work might be new to some listeners. And again, this is Will Wright, not Will Doran. We have two Will politics reporters here on our team between the two papers. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at the Charlotte Observer.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I came to the Observer in the summer of 2021 to write about basically all things politics. So that's from anything from city council in Charlotte to the U.S. Senate race right now. And so with the elections coming up, I focused a lot on the U.S. Senate race and also the state legislative races in the Charlotte area.
Okay, great. So we're glad to have your insight on the other end of the state and not just here in Capital City. So as we record this on Friday, the first round of early voting information is in. So let me get that out. Chris Cooper, our oft-quoted politics professor, that we use in a lot of our work, has a tweet thread today about the first day of in-person early voting, also known as one-stop voting. So there have been 135,391 ballots accepted and reported, and that's compared to 136,454 on day one in 2018, which was the last midterm election. Those numbers are pretty close, so not a whole lot of changes there. And about 51,000 mail ballots were accepted through yesterday. And just looking at the overall historical trends of who likes to early vote, so far the one stop has been 39% Democrats, 33% Republicans, 28% unaffiliated. And then by mail, almost half Democrats, 17% Republicans, 24% unaffiliated. So Will and Avi, where do you see this is a very early indicator of turnout, but as far as what the different candidates and parties might need with what we're seeing so far, Avi, tell me what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. You mentioned that there's pretty equal amount of ballots reported on the first day this year compared to 2018. The first thing I think of is there are some other big elections, some other big races around the country. The first thing I think of is Georgia. And Georgians have been sort of smashing the record in their state for early voting, just the first 4 or 5 days of early voting there. So it's kind of interesting to see this, but, I think it's probably going to tick up the sort of, further along we get. So I probably wouldn't want to read too much into this on the first day, but it's pretty interesting.
Georgia has just national attention races this year. It's a little quieter here. Usually North Carolina is pretty lively politically, but not compared to Georgia this round. Will, what do you think about that? Just how we are in general, especially looking at interest in the U.S. Senate race here versus Georgia and how that might impact turnout.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it all plays out because, in 2018, that was the middle of the Trump administration. And, I think the turnout was high in 2018 compared to previous years on non-presidential elections. So if we can match 2018, I think that would be indicative of that people are still really engaged in politics after the Trump administration. Not to put everything on that, but I think that, that probably played a role in 2018. And it seems like it's still lingering if that's the case.
So we're still early on early voting. And by the time we talk to listeners again a week from now, we'll probably see a little more indicators of how things are going. Will, going back to Charlotte, what are the big races in your end of the state that people are concerned about? And how will that turnout impact, certain candidates more than others?
Yeah, so like everywhere else in the state, the Bud Beasley race is probably going to be the biggest draw. But there are some state legislative seats that are interesting in the Charlotte area, including in Matthews, Northern Mecklenburg, and Concord, that are actually pretty tight. So I'll be curious to see how many people come out there compared to elsewhere in the county where, one party is heavily favored. And then on the congressional side, we've got Alma Adams up for re-election. She's in a very safe district. Her Republican competitor, Tyler Lee, would have to pull off something spectacular to beat her. And then in the other district, it's a new district between half of Mecklenburg County and roughly half of Gaston County. That's between State Senator Jeff Jackson and Pat Harrigan, who's a first-time candidate and owns a gun manufacturing business. So that district leans Democratic for sure, but it's certainly closer than Adams' district. So, if I'm Jeff Jackson, I might be a little worried that if Pat Harrigan really gets Republicans out there, he has a chance. But it's definitely an uphill battle for Harrigan. But he's told me that he thinks it's closer than what people are giving it credit for.
Do you think this is Jeff Jackson's turn finally? Obviously, he wanted to run for federal office for a while, and do you think this will be what gets him there?
He's definitely the favorite. So yeah, I think that there's a very good chance Jeff Jackson will head to Washington. Like you said, that he dropped out of the U.S. Senate race, and this is obviously a goal of his to move up the ladder in terms of going from Raleigh to Washington. So he's got a very good shot of it in November.
Who else in the Mecklenburg delegation? Are there some that are unopposed or in safe districts anyway, and it's not as big a deal for them? I know it's not exactly Mecklenburg, but Speaker Moore, Kings Mountain, he's running unopposed. He'll be speaker again. Or are there other cases like that where it's just a given that they'll be returning?
Yeah, there are. I mean, in Mecklenburg and outside, there are. There's maybe 4 districts that are competitive. I would say that are really competitive. The rest of them are lean one way or the other. Usually in Mecklenburg County, that would mean they lean Democratic. As soon as you get outside of Mecklenburg County, they tend to lean Republican. So there's really only a handful of districts in the Charlotte area that are competitive, but every seat counts this election for the state legislature.
Right. And so a lot of those races have gotten somewhat contentious, at least in some of their mailers and some of the tight General Assembly races in the rest of the state. There's the Valerie Jordan, Bobby Hanig, which is 10 counties and goes from Warren County all the way to Currituck, which is Hanig's end. Hanig, people remember, was a state house representative and then was appointed to finish the rest of the Senate district term of where he's running. And that one has gotten a lot of attention because of Valerie Jordan's residency being challenged. And now on the other side, a different member of Jordan's a Democrat, and the Board of Elections said that's fine. She can continue to run. And then just this past week, E.C. Sykes in Northern Wake County has had his residency challenged. So we'll see where that goes. And Sykes is one where I've seen a lot of TV ads and mailers with Mary Willis Bodie is the Democratic opponent. Some of the other, we've got a few other big races. Sydney Batch is a big one too. And Avi, you've been looking into some of these mailers, which we're at the time here just a few weeks out that it's mailers every day. I live in Raleigh, and I just got some local campaign mailers yesterday. I was like, oh, that's right. There's local elections too, other than the tsunami of Ted Budd mailers that I get, and some Beasley, and then the legislative races. So what are some of the things that we're seeing on these mailers that are true, not true? And what do you think people should know about it?
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of mailers, like you said. I've personally been getting a lot of Vaughan's mailers. I live sort of close to Southern Wake County. Both parties and PACs affiliated with them, they've been pouring millions of dollars into the Senate race between Beasley and Budd that Will was talking about, but also some important House races. So I would expect them to continue investing as many resources as possible in these final days of campaigning. The ads and mailers we've been fact checking are in competitive races for both Congress and the state legislature. We had a series of mailers attacking some candidates for state house on the Democratic side on the issue of police funding. We had some mailers out in Alamance County. There's the race between Ricky Hurtado and Steve Ross, and there was a mailer going around sort of showing Hurtado wearing a T-shirt that said "Defund the Police." The catch with that was, of course, that wasn't a real image. It was an edited or altered image.
We're going to take a quick break and then talk more about this. We'll be back with more from Avi about these ads, and then also our picks for Headliner of the Week.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm News and Observer Politics reporter Dawn Vaughan, here with Avi Bajpai and Charlotte Observer reporter Will Wright. Avi, before the break, you were talking about the latest in these ad mailers and the fact checks there. So if you can pick us back up about, it was a Hurtado mailer was one of the ones you were looking at, right?
Yeah, that was the mailer, like I was mentioning, was attacking Hurtado on this issue of police funding. It's obviously been a controversial issue in state politics, national politics since 2020. So we did a fact check on that mailer. But there were also a series of ads, TV ads, a lot of money poured into those ads in the 13th congressional district race. This is the most competitive race for Congress on the ballot this fall. It's sort of in the outskirts of the triangle. It's got sort of sliver of Wake County, Wayne County, Harnett County, and then all of Johnston County. And this is the race between Wiley Nickel and Bo Hines. And you can take a look at our fact checks for these ads. These were a couple of ads that were attacking Wiley Nickel. He's the Democratic candidate. He's also a criminal defense attorney. He's based in Cary. And these were ads sort of attacking him on the kinds of cases that his law firm has taken, sort of trying to portray him as soft on crime. And then sort of in response, the Nickel campaign had an ad out against their opponent, Bo Hines, basically looking into his record, doing sort of a background check and finding some speeding tickets on his record and some sort of traffic citations, driving with a sort of expired tag, and putting up sort of a salacious ad that says, Bo Hines has faced multiple criminal charges. So we took a look at that fact check. We did a fact check on that ad as well. But basically, it's a bunch of ads about the issues of crime and the legal system.
Okay, well, I'm sure that there'll be more of the flurry of the final mailers as people have the funding for it. Or maybe they're already in your mailboxes, but we're getting pretty close. Whether people have already voted and it doesn't matter and you're wasting it, but maybe they haven't decided yet. So, which will play into my headliner of the week here in a minute. But before we get to that, we need to talk about something else, of course, that's come up with the news.
Yeah, Don, you were at the legislative building this week. You talked to some lawmakers about any sort of legislative response people might expect in the wake of this horrific mass shooting that happened in Raleigh last week. Can you tell us about that? Will we see any changes in gun laws?
Probably nothing major anytime soon, really. Part of it is that it's usually the response of Democrats who look to laws as the immediate answer, and Republicans generally do not. They'll mention laws that are already on the books. That's usually the response. So knowing that was the case, the Democrats held a press conference this week saying, yes, they mentioned certain laws that they would like to change, but also Representative Reeves just said, can we just have a conversation? They just want to talk about solutions. And if, some responses, no, we're not, because you're just using this tragedy for political gains. So what I wrote about, again, knowing that this plays out after every shooting, Democrats say this, Republicans say that, nothing happens. Maybe it does eventually, of course, at the federal level. Tillis's gun reform bill and the changes there, it incentivized legislatures to pass red flag laws. Are Republicans interested in this? Doesn't look like it. Maybe some version, if there's work to be done. Durham Democrat Marcia Morey is really has been on this issue for years. She's a former judge. and is hoping that there's some sort of common ground there. If you look at a lot of polling of just average people, they do support some version of this. But as Senator Perry, the Kinston Republican, told me this week, the devil's in the details. That's the same thing that Senate Leader Berger has told me in the past. So what I want to do is look at, is there any common ground like that can actually definitely happen? And it looks like the biggest chance of something, happening would be a gun safety storage bill from Representative Hanig. I mentioned him earlier. I'm sorry, he's Senator Hanig now, the Republican, and it's just an awareness campaign. It's no mandate, and Republicans don't like a lot of mandates when it comes to anything related to firearms. And Allison Dahl, the Wake County Democrat, is a big supporter of that. And she said, there's this messaging that conservatives think Democrats are coming for your guns. She said that's not the case because she has guns too and doesn't want anyone, she wants to be able to keep her firearms as well. So can they all agree that responsible gun owners should have some sort of an incentivization to safely store those weapons to keep them out of the hands of the wrong people? Seems like that's where the common ground is. And if that's the actual movement that they get, that's what we're looking at. So I'm sure there'll be much, much more to come on all of that. Now it's time for Headliner of the Week. Kind of somewhat on this topic and what's been happening. Avi, you want to give us your headliner?
Yeah, my headliner for this week is the police officers and the first responders who played a role and sort of responded to this terrible shooting that took place here in Raleigh last week. We've learned a lot in the sort of aftermath of this in the following days about the role that they played in securing the neighborhood where this shooting took place, keeping residents safe, and tracking down the alleged shooter and taking him into custody. And then, of course, over the past week, doing a lot of investigative work to try and figure out what happened. It's been a devastating week for Raleigh, but a lot of our colleagues, we've been covering vigils and other gatherings that took place over the weekend and are continuing memorials this week. And, I just thought it was really heartening to see everyone come together to remember the victims and just mourn as a community.
All right. Segueing back to the other action this week with early voting, my headliner is the unaffiliated voter. I wrote earlier this year, I'd started writing a story that by the summer, unaffiliated voters would become the largest voting group in the state. Turns out it wasn't even summer yet. It was late spring when it happened. I think it was early May. And so unaffiliated voters doesn't mean they're not Democratic voters or Republican voters or Libertarian or Green or whatever. It's just that they don't have to sign up with a party to vote in their primary, so they don't. And that's one of the reasons why that's the case in North Carolina. It also is people who maybe don't want to be told what to do by a political party and decide election to election. So that tiny little margin of people who haven't thought yet is where people win or lose in North Carolina because we're such an evenly divided political state. So the unaffiliated voter is my headliner. Will, what's your headliner this week?
Yeah, so we had two big political figures come to Charlotte this week. We had Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina come and give a panel with Ted Budd. We had Cory Booker of New Jersey come and have a rally in Charlotte for Sherry Beasley. And so I'm just curious to see if any other big names are gonna show up in North Carolina. Obviously, we had former President Trump come, was that 2 weeks ago, maybe not too long ago for Ted Budd. So yeah, we'll see. Duke Professor Kerry Haney told me he wondered if Obama was going to come for Beasley. I haven't heard anything about that, but that'd be interesting to see. So just going to keep my eyes out and see if we have any other big names swinging through.
I remember we were all wondering, just these past few years, if Obama would show up. And he was certainly in North Carolina a lot when he was running, but I don't know if we've seen him since. So who knows? Maybe it'll be the big flurry of everybody. I guess Dave Matthews is coming from Beasley. We'll see who else comes for Bud. So, all right. For the News and Observer and the Charlotte Observer and the NC Insider, I'm Dawn Vaughan with Avi Bajpai and Will Wright. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.